Well, I think at this point we're doing well in terms of welcoming people, and I know that we have some wonderful presenters today, and I want to give them the time to share their wisdom with us, and for us to have a chance to discuss it among ourselves. So, a very warm welcome to you from Process and Faith Twin Cities. My name is Jeanyne Slettom, and I am part of the team that puts together these programs. Our team includes James Hart, Paul Green, Lynn Lorenzen, Kirsten Mabust, Louise Pardee, Mary Kay Sauter, Carol Swanson, and Paul Sponheim. And for those on earlier, I say Paul last but not least because he is Professor Emeritus of Luther Seminary, and many of the people that are process people in Minnesota came to it through Paul and his teaching at Luther Seminary. So the whole team welcomes you. We offer 3 programs a year, always free, that explore applications of process theology to various areas of Christian ministry and to topics that engage thoughtful people everywhere. Say a little bit more about that in a moment, but if you would like to get our very few emails that announce our events, you're welcome to just go into the chat and give us your email, and Kirsten Mabust will be the one who contacts you, and she is very good. We do not send out weekly or even monthly notices. We just let you know when we've got a program scheduled and give you a chance to decide if you want to come to it or not. So Kirsten is the one who is the keeper of that list, and we encourage you, if you'd like to get those emails, to sign up in the chat. Process and Faith Twin Cities is affiliated with the Center for Process Studies and the Cobb Institute's Process and Faith program. PNF has been around for a long time, but it recently got an upgrade to include multiple faiths. This had been a dream of PNF for many years, so it is wonderful to see how it is unfolding now. And Jared, if you would just pull up that PNF page. Here is the new processandfaith.org.
Yeah, here it is. Beautiful homepage giving a wonderful overview, but this is not where the most exciting things are happening. So if you were able to register for today, which you did if you are in this Zoom right now, you must have been in our events tab, and there's a lot of wonderful things that will be popping up here. So do keep your eyes peeled on the events. And we also have a little online community here with sort of forums that you can chat with others about special topics. And we're currently building out different resources to include on the website as well. So many exciting things. There's all sorts of PNF social media channels nowadays: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, which is probably where the recording from today will be shared if you want to pass it along to any friends. So yes, many exciting things for Process and Faith nowadays.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you so much. But before I introduce our presenters, I would like to put the attention back on Jared. Jared Morningstar is our tech facilitator. You're with the Cobb Institute. Is it officially the Cobb, or are you with PNF?
I'm with the Cobb Institute and the Center for Process Studies, so okay. Whichever works.
All right, great. He's an independent academic specializing in 20th century religious philosophy, Islamic studies, and interfaith dialogue. And for all you Minnesotans, he's located next door to us in Wisconsin, in Madison, but he got his religion and Scandinavian studies degree from Gustavus Adolphus College. So he's a Gusty, if there are any of the rest of you out there. So we are a small outfit. So we're thrilled that our presenters agreed to be with us this morning, made possible by Zoom. Some of us may be weary of Zoom meetings, but we are grateful that it makes this meeting possible. At our last PNF Twin Cities meeting, we had a pull no punches presentation on climate change, and we ended with an intense desire to identify ways to go forward in hope. And that was the genesis of today's program, Beauty in a Time of Lament. And for that focus on beauty, it was a no-brainer who to ask to be with us. Jay McDaniel is Executive Director of the Cobb Institute for Community and Practice. He's the author of several books, including What is Process Thought? 7 Answers to 7 Questions, which is the book that we here have been focusing on for this program year. He's an amateur musician who plays sing-along music at nursing homes, and he has a special interest in ways that music on the one hand and the natural world on the other can be sacraments for whole living. His website, openhorizons.org, I think Jared's going to put that in the chat for you, features many articles and images at the intersection of process and beauty. Patricia Adams Farmer is a process theologian, a minister, and a writer with a special focus on beauty. She is the one who introduced me to the concept of a beauty break, which I have been doing a lot of in these rather, I'm tired of saying unprecedented times, but the other alternative is dire. So Patricia's beauty breaks have become very important for me. Her books include Embracing a Beautiful God, A Philosophy of Size, S-I-Z-E. And then there's a book that she and Jay edited together, Replanting Ourselves in Beauty. And she also wrote Beauty and Process Theology, as well as 2 theological novels, The Metaphor Maker and Fat Soul Fridays. And I think we put just a couple of links to, of course, I couldn't resist doing Replanting Ourselves in Beauty, since that's a Process Century Press book, but also her book, Process and Beauty and Process Theology. So that's enough of an introduction. I hope I am eager to hear both of you. Please take it away.
Okay. Well, Jeanyne, I just want to thank you so much for inviting me. And I am just so happy to be here and look forward to spending the morning with all of you. I recognize some of you from my process and beauty and process theology group class at the Cobb Institute, and looking forward to getting to know all of you. And so I want to start this morning with, I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. And then I'm going to start with a PowerPoint presentation that will be about 15 minutes. And then I'll have about 5 minutes for any sharing that or questions that you might have before going on to Jay, who will be offering some beautiful life illustrations of the concepts I talk about and some poetry. And I'm really looking forward to his presentation. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, well, I want to begin with some short, in fact, Jay asked me if I would do this, start with some short excerpts from my essay called Spirit Bathing for the Worried and Beleaguered. And it's on Open Horizons. And Jay added another title, and his title is There a Place for Gladness in Saving the World? And after what you guys have been through, I thought this sounds like what you might need. And certainly that is the question. And here's how the poet Jack Gilbert answers it. He said, we must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. A ruthless furnace indeed. So for all who feel deeply about the world, for all who mourn a planet under siege, for all who care about justice and human dignity and democracy and the welfare of the most vulnerable, these are hard times, shocking and dispiriting days. When is it all going to turn around? Well, it will turn around, I'm convinced, but at a great price for waiting so long. And my theory is that we humans are an 11th hour species, waiting until it is almost too late to do anything to save ourselves. But we do, history tells us we do, barely by the skin of our teeth. While the future remains open with no guarantees, I believe that the current moral sickness will break like a fever and we will see better days. And we who care and dare and dream and choose kindness are part of that recovery, even if we can't see the results at present. And this is where spirit bathing comes in. Now, spirit bathing is a form of soul care. Spirit bathing invites the worried and beleaguered into the flowing waters of grace and reassurance. It cleanses and soothes and refreshes our souls with goodness that is still with us, joy that is still in us, and laughter that bubbles up against all efforts to stamp it out. Soul bathing is highly individual in practice, but certain universal forms draw us in. And one of those, of course, is forest bathing. Now, forest bathing is a term coined by the Japanese in which the stressed out and urbanized go deep into the trees and discover not only superb air for the lungs, but rest for the soul. And when I practice forest bathing, which isn't very often, but when I do, I can truly let go, not trying to better myself, but rather just be myself with the trees, cleansing green, dappled light, the hum of cicada, and the endless varieties of birdsong. That's a spirit bath. Other forms of spirit bathing include walking along a beach or a lake or in a garden. And the solace of books can revive a dampened spirit, opening the pores to fresh hope and other worlds. Music and art and 100 different forms of craft and creativity can soothe and heal. And sometimes just being with joyful people can wash away despair. Well, spirit bathing is a fragrant reminder of the goodness that never forsakes us. It reminds us why we resist and what our values are. It assures us that we live in a world not only filled with violence and hate, but also stubbornly infused with divine surprise, delicious moments, and a flow of freshness that can sustain us through the worst of times just like these. And so you can read the entire essay on Open Horizons, but spirit bathing is what we do when we make time for, as Jeanyne mentioned, beauty breaks. And that includes creative breaks too. Well, because beauty is transformative and it taps into our reservoirs of stubborn gladness. And this kind of beauty with a capital B, has a backstory in process theology. So let me just share some slides from the Cobb Institute Educational Toolbox, which I'll go through pretty quickly, but you can study it for yourself on the website, as well as other wonderful slideshows that you'll find there on the Cobb Institute resources. So let's just go through this, and so you'll know kind of what I mean when I talk about beauty. Okay, the dream of beauty. The teleology of the universe is directed toward the production of beauty. Beauty is God's dream for the world, the guiding lure in every moment of becoming. God lures diverse elements toward rich, complex forms of well-being. Beauty is a combination of harmony and intensity, or intense harmony. The poet of the world. In human life, God's beauty is not found in the dazzling garments of a scepter-wielding king, but in love, gentleness, playfulness, and wonder. God is the poet of the world. Just as poets invite us into their world, not through force, but through persuasion, so God lovingly beckons us toward intense harmony through attraction, not coercion. Artistic beauty. Musicians, painters, dancers, and creative artists of all kinds intuitively understand how Whitehead's idea of intense harmony creates the most lasting emotional and spiritual experiences. Works of art at their best evoke goodness, beauty, and truth across a spectrum of feeling. Soul beauty. The soul is not a static, isolated, enclosed part of our being, but rather a river of experiences saturated with divinity and reflecting all creation. A beautiful soul is adaptable, renewing, changing, and flowing toward a wider sea of enriching fullness. A wide and welcoming soul is never static, but refreshingly alive to the infinite web of relationships that grounded in the world. Tragic beauty. The adventure of the universe starts with a dream and reaps tragic beauty. Tragic beauty can arise out of the worst of circumstances, much like the resurrection of Jesus. God's power is not unilateral, magical power that can just wipe out a virus in an instant or stop a bullet. Rather, God's power in the world is relational power, shared power. God is the great companion, the fellow sufferer who understands. Moral beauty. Justice and compassion are forms of beauty. They establish a rich connection that are loving, fair, respectful, and inclusive. That's the word. Moral beauty often begins with dreams for a better world. Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech is an example. But the beauty is not complete until embodied in the richness of concrete relations. Moral beauty includes a wide embrace of all colors, literally all skin colors, as well as the vibrant colors of culture, religion, and ideological differences within a larger harmony or harmony of harmonies. Natural beauty, the hills and rivers, the trees and stars are all forms of natural beauty. The beauty lies in what they are and how they express themselves in their contrast with one another. Beauty is harmony, but harmony is not sameness. Harmony needs diversity. God is deeply present within all creation, but is more than creation. In the blooming and dying, we witness on a larger scale the perpetual perishing of every experienced moment as new moments arise, and the pathos in nature heightens our awareness of beauty. And finally, beauty and hope. We are not locked into the past or into any predetermined outcome for the future. The flow from the past to the creative present means each moment infused with divinity begins anew. This process is the source of freshness, creativity, and zest. We are called to work with God to bring forth beauty. Resilience is required, but despair need not apply. Process theology is a theology of hope. And now I want to touch briefly on two of these aspects that I just mentioned, especially tragic beauty and hope. Now, we're all familiar with the Japanese art of repairing broken vessels with gold, kintsugi, which means to join with gold. And this is, I think, a good metaphor for the Whiteheadian notion of tragic beauty, which carries with it this transformational aspect. But to be open to God's initial aims for transformation, we need to know our sadness and care for it with compassion. Well, during the first phases of COVID, I decided to try something new, to take up classical guitar. And I'm still a beginner, but it's a solace that has become my favorite form of spirit bathing because, well, I was talking to Jay recently, and he's a seasoned guitar player and does these wonderful things with his music to bring gladness to others. But I was talking to him about how these days I find myself playing nothing but minor chords and sad music. And for some reason, I find it oddly comforting to leave my cheerful self outside the room along with my anger. I leave all that outside while I play melancholy music. And I do that because I think I need to get in touch with my sadness, especially over climate change and the horrors of mass shootings. But with music, it is not like you're wallowing in sadness, but rather embracing it with the view to transforming it into some semblance of beauty. And with that comes gladness. Now, beauty often carries with it both sadness and gladness at the same time. Think of the cherry blossom or the music that taps into your deepest longings. In process thought, the very notion of beauty often includes sadness. Whitehead calls this perpetual perishing, And the Japanese call it mano no aware, the pathos of things. The ephemeral, fragile nature of the cherry blossom in spring intensifies the experience of its preciousness. At my house, it's the lilacs that pass too soon, creating a sense of melancholy beauty. Well, beauty in a Whiteheadian sense carries this idea of creative contrasts. And it's a way of holding together the sadness and the gladness in a larger harmony of harmonies. And that's why I like to preach about fat souls and fattening up our souls, because it's a matter of expanding them to include, making room to include such contrasting elements. So we take our pain and our sorrow and we spin it into beauty through either creating something ourselves or through immersing ourselves in the beauty of others, like the art of Van Gogh, which I am highlighting today. Poets and musicians are especially good at transforming the bitter into the sweet. In fact, Bittersweet is the title of a new book by Susan Cain that I highly recommend. A book that she started out with the question, why do I love Leonard Cohen's music so much? Well, she tells us that it's because of the longing and sadness being transformed into what she calls bittersweet. And maybe that's why Whitehead refers to God as the poet of the world, because like Leonard Cohen, God takes the bitter and transforms it into the sweet or bittersweet, which is, I think bittersweet is a good word for tragic beauty. We take our sadness with us, always caring for it, but we also allow ourselves to touch something else too. And that is the realization that there is more than our suffering. Now, for me, a big part of something more is hope. And especially lately, a part of that hope has been bathing myself in meditations on heaven or the afterlife. And I think that's because after Uvalde, this is the only form of beauty that really worked for me, is thinking of the afterlife and of heaven. Is something that we normally don't think about. So I do believe in heaven. That is not just objective immortality, but subjective immortality, a resurrection of the soul. And to get into the subject, you may want to read Marjorie Suhaki's books and a couple of intriguing new books. David Griffin's James and Whitehead on Life After Death, that's through Process Century Press. And then Bruce Grayson's After. Whoa, kind of the two go together because Grayson gets into the NDEs. And if you go to the University of Virginia's Perceptual Studies website, you'll find more resources on the growing scientific studies on near-death experiences. Well, of course, in NDEs, there are differences as they interpret their experiences through cultural and religious lenses. But there is an underlying consistency that at the core of the experience is the kind of God or ultra reality described exactly as process theologians imagine, a core of unconditional and infinite love. And that what we do in this life makes a difference to God. Now, beauty is everywhere in NDEs. Those interviewed often describe our beauty experiences in our world as keyholes views to heaven. And they describe new colors that we cannot perceive. Can you imagine new colors that we just can't perceive? And music beyond anything we've heard in this world, just indescribable beauty. And we perceive it, of course, dimly in this world, as Paul, we think about in 1 Corinthians, I see through a glass darkly, but still we catch glimpses of heaven as through a keyhole when we experience the full force of love and beauty in this life. And so then through our spirit bathing in meditation, music, art, nature, we can catch a glimpse of eternity and of God's transforming presence in this world. And that gives us hope to continue changing this world. And with these glimpses into the intense harmony, into the depths of God, we can affirm with Julian Norwich, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. For there is a force of love moving through the universe that holds us fast and will never let us go. I want to turn it over to Jay, who's been my inspiration and mentor for many years. And Jay, I always honed in on his works because of his focus on beauty. So Jay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Patricia, thanks so much. And it's such an honor to be here. And I have to admit, it's an honor to be in the presence of Paul Sponheim. I think I met him. I met you once, Paul, I think.
Yes.
I knew many of your students, Ernest Simmons in particular.
Sure.
An old friend of mine went to school with him, but you're a hero in my books. And I just want to thank you for all that you've done and do.
Thank you so much, Jay. Yes, we did meet way back. I was living in Wrightwood, coming down the mountain to audit the advanced Whitehead class that John was teaching. And you were around, you were working on assembling a bibliography, is that right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've read your works, not in the totality, but I've certainly read enough to know what a scholar, a helpful scholar you are. So a big thanks to you.
It's wonderful that you could present today. And so let's get you going.
All right. Well, in light of what Patricia said, I'm kind of I'm adjusting. I want to add a kind of beauty that's not mentioned. I like everything Patricia says, and this is an addition. I want to add the concept of momentary beauty. That is, moments of beauty which don't last forever, but which nevertheless provide sustenance for life. And I want to propose, actually, that no tragedy erases those moments. And so if you think of the lives of the children shot in Uvalde, of course that's tragic. But no tragedy erases the moments of beauty, of joy, of friendship, of relationships, of yearning that they had. And I would add that that is true, God or no God. There can be no God whatsoever. And those moments still have value. And they still provide sustenance. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Now, I'm kidding there. Those are the lines to John Lennon's Imagine. But even if that were true, I still cast a vote for beauty and think it has tremendous power. So what I'd like to do is to read a poem that links beauty with the impulse to mend the world. And then say a word about that. And Paul, at the end, sometime today, I want to get to the question of concreteness and what can actually be done in local settings to concretize the hopes that we have. And I want to share with you some of the work of the Cobb Institute. But allow me for the moment to dig in also at that spiritual level that Patricia brings up and then we'll turn to the concrete in time. Toward that end, I'd like to tell you, I asked Jared, our friend Jared, to create a slideshow for me and a PowerPoint for me, which he did, which is absolutely beautiful. And it's I call it dwelling musically in the world. And in that PowerPoint, I develop a religion. I wanted to build a religion. I call it the religion of kindness and beauty. And Jared's slideshow is great, but I think it's a little too much. So I just wanted him to pull it up and kind of scroll through it, but land on the poem, Jared, and we'll read the poem together.
Sounds good, Jay.
I don't think we need to read any of that, Jared, just kind of.
Yep.
This lays out the idea of dwelling musically in the world. That particular slide talks about mountains and rivers and hills as events. This one talks about patterns in nature. And now I begin to develop the notion of a religious of kindness and beauty. And you can stop there just for a second. It has two essential beliefs. One is that the most important thing we can do in our lives is to be kind or compassionate. Kind to other people, kind to animals, kind to the earth, and kind to ourselves. And that's more important than fame, fortune, and power. Second belief is that despite life's many tragedies, there is beauty in life that is never fully eclipsed by the sadness. The beauty in friendships, in the natural world, in silence, in music. The beauty doesn't justify the tragedies, but it's never fully eclipsed. And this is a little quote from Whitehead. He has a marvelous little line in Process and Reality where he says, philosophy must take into account the multitudinous of life. In his language, the fairies dance and Christ is nailed to the cross. They're both true. And my suggestion here is that the religion of kindness and beauty can be incorporated into and enriched by Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism. It doesn't compete with them. They can deepen it and enrich it, but it can enrich them too. Next slide. A Jew might call the religion of kindness and beauty being a good Jew. A Muslim might call it being a good Muslim. A secular person might call it being a good person. That's fine. Keep going. And keep going. In imagining this religion of kindness and beauty, I say it's certainly open to beliefs in God. I myself believe in God. I'm a process theologian, but I'm certainly open to many ways of thinking about God, including those that are not process theological in orientation. So I say in this one, you can envision God anywhere, any way you want, as friend, as interconnectedness, as music. The important thing is that your belief in God helps make you kinder. That's the bottom line. By the way, when I say kind, I mean kind in a deep, wide sense. I include justice, fairness, compassion, shared joy, shared suffering. So I found a poem that, to my mind, illustrates this in some way. And it's called Collecting Light by Deborah Cooper. And it goes like this. I see the way the chickadees take turns at the feeder. I watch a neighbor take her husband's hand. I see the way the sun will find the only interruption in dark clouds to toss this amber light across the pines. I see a row of cars stop on the road until the orange cat has safely crossed, and then take off slowly should she change her mind. I watch the way my brother lifts our mother from the wheelchair to the car, the shawl he lays across her lap. I save up every scrap of light because I know that it will take each tiny consolation every day to mend the world. And I'd like you to note that in that poem, there's several kinds of beauty that Patricia mentions. One is the natural beauty of the sun shining through the dark clouds, tossing its amber light. One is just poignant human beauty. I watch a neighbor take her husband's hand. One is the beauty of kindness toward animals. I see a row of cars stop on the road until the orange cat has safely crossed and then take off slowly, should you change your mind. And one is the poignancy of loving relationships within a family. I watch the way my brother lifts our mother from the wheelchair to the car, the shawl he lays across her lap. The last line is, I save up every scrap of light as it offers nourishment to help mend the world. And so I thought I'd just note some other kinds of scraps of light personally, because I want to invite you also to consider scraps of light. The nice thing about that poem is the images are concrete. They're specific, and there's something important about that. They're not abstract. So here's a scrap of light for me, and maybe for you, there's something like this. When I learned to swim, when I was 6 or 7 years old, I learned to swim in a river. It was the Guadalupe River in the hill country of Texas. And I learned very quickly to swim underwater with goggles. And my parents would be on the bank having a picnic, watching me, but I'd be underwater. And I was aware of a beautiful world, a deep world. And it was silent. It was a little scary. There were fish, water moccasins even, but it was okay. And I could look up at that light world, but here I was in that deep world. And I think that was my first experience of prayer, of contemplative prayer, not the prayer of address, but the prayer of being in something that's beautiful and deep and quiet. That's a scrap of light. Another one for me was animals. I loved them. And I have to admit, sorry, cat people, I like cats too, but I was a dog person. And the whole idea of being with a dog and petting a dog and feeling the fur and looking in the eyes of the dog. As a matter of fact, I have one in my room right now as I'm speaking. And when you pet a dog, you know there's a soul in there. There's a self. And it's not you, but it's beautiful. It has a life of its own. And that's beautiful. Well, that's a scrap of light for me. And I bet many of you have a scrap of light from a relationship with an animal. And maybe that animal has died. That does not erase one bit the joy and beauty of that relationship. Another scrap of light for me, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this because it'll surely show my age, was the music of Elvis Presley. Now, I knew the early Elvis, and I was a little young, and I wasn't supposed to watch him on Ed Sullivan, but I did. And I saw him wiggle his pelvis and sing those songs and have a kind of electricity, a kind of dynamism. It was almost forbidden. And it was beautiful because it was forbidden. In the sound and the rhythm, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Now, a last example from my life is when my father died. And I was in the critical care unit of the hospital the last time I saw him, and a sturdy man and strapped to the bed because he was trying to move and they didn't want him to move. And I knew I couldn't fix things. I couldn't make it all okay. I couldn't change what was happening, but I could be with him. I could not leave. I could stay by that bedside. I could hold his hand. I could breathe with him. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I had an intuition there in that moment. Something went wide, W-I-D-E, in me. And it was a sense of a wideness that somehow includes everything. As it is. As it is. And I thought of Whitehead's notion of God as the eternal companion, a fellow sufferer who understands. That's beautiful. So my sense is that in the house of beauty, there are so many rooms, and that they become scraps of light for us. And they give us energy for life. And they help us, they help nourish us as we might seek to help mend a broken world. It's natural for Christians and theists to want to say that God is the source of those scraps. I think that's true. I think when we experience a scrap of light, we experience God. We touch something, much more than us. But process theology would add also that God is a recipient of the light. We give the light to God. And those moments when we are true or playful or alive or kind or zestful, they add something to God's life that would not be there otherwise. And even if the earth collapsed tomorrow, that would still be true. So there's a kind of deep beauty that's really beautiful. Now, as for the modes of beauty, I'm going to ask Jared to show a little diagram that illustrates, both for Patricia and me, the varieties of beauty in the house of beauty. And it's the spiritual alphabet from spirituality and practice. Like, you know, just to say, what do you mean by beauty? Well, here are some images, here's some words. So there's a group that we're both influenced by, Patricia and I. It's called Spirituality and Practice. And they offer a little image of qualities of heart and mind that contain their own beauty. So up there, a little past the right, is attention. It's an alphabet, attention. And then they include beauty, but I say beauty is the whole thing. Being present, compassion, connections, devotion, enthusiasm, faith, forgiveness, gratitude, hope, hospitality, imagination, joy, justice, kindness, listening, love, meaning making amidst struggle, just carving out meaning. That's Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Nurturing, openness, peace, play. Think of how children play. Think of how animals play. Think of how you play. Those moments of playfulness, moments of freedom, forms of beauty. Questioning. Now, I bet you I've got some folks in here that have a lot of questions. And rightly so. Questioning. Hard questions, not easily, if at all, answered. Think of that intensity. Think of that openness, form of beauty. Reverence, shadow, being honest about our sinfulness and honest about our suffering. I think honesty about sinfulness is a form of beauty. There's a kind of rightness to it. Silence, teachers, Paul Sponheim, for example. Creative transformation, unity, vision, wonder. X, a sense of mystery. The freedom to say, you know, I don't know. And that's kind of beautiful too. And you, a sense of self-worth, an impulse to say, I am somebody. I am somebody too. In zeal, zest for life. So for me, I think as I look at this with Whiteheadian eyes, you can unscreen now, Jared. I suggest that what a Whiteheadian, a process thinker means by beauty, it's all of them. It's all of them. So that's what I wanted to share a little bit. And I think that's why beauty matters so much to me. I have to admit, I think I'm with some Lutherans here, maybe, or any Lutherans among us? Raise your hand if you have a dose of Lutheranism in you. Well, that's great. I'm a Methodist, and I sometimes worry that we Methodists, I don't know if Lutherans have this problem. We Methodists focus so much on goodness and justice, but we sometimes forget the beauty. We sometimes forget that justice and goodness are forms of beauty. I actually think sacramental traditions have a better understanding of this because they know there can be God in sight, color, smell, movement. In the beginning was the beauty, and the beauty was with God, and it was God. That's enough. So I think what I'd like to invite all of you to do, and Jared will break us out into groups, and you'll meet for about 10 minutes. And do you remember the poem? Nod your head if you remember the poem. Please nod your head. If you were going to add an image to that poem from your life, I see the way the cars stop when the orange cat crosses the road and don't go any further, making sure the cat goes by her. I see the way the sunlight shines through the azure sky. Or I see the way my neighbor takes her partner's hand. Add one of your own and let it be concrete. And let it be from your life that functions in your life as a scrap of light. And then Paul's question, then how do we mend the world? We'll turn to that afterwards, okay? And I don't want to leave our meeting without responding to Paul in a somewhat concrete way about how now big ideas can come down to earth and what the process folks are trying to do concretely. So I think it'll just take a minute, but I'm going to ask Jared to throw up a little slideshow from the Cobb Institute. And this is for you, Paul.
It sounds good.
Okay, so can you throw it up, Jared?
Grabbing it right now.
All right.
Which one are we going to, Jay?
That one right there. Ecological civilization in just and compassionate communities. So this is where many in the process movement are today. This is where big ideas come down to earth. And this is the earth part. So if you could scroll forward, Jared, just. And we begin with the idea that, go back to that other one, that's what's needed so today is something like a different kind of civilization, an ecological civilization. And in that civilization, people recognize that we are part of the earth community, the larger web of life with plants and animals, landscapes and waterways, a network of interbecoming. And then forward it a little bit. And the units of such a civilization would be local communities in urban and rural settings that are creative, compassionate, participatory, inclusive, humane to animals, and good for the earth with no one left behind. Next slide. And next slide. And what would a community look like that embodies that spirit? And we're learning so much from so many people about what it would look like in terms of food and housing and economics and city planning and culture and education and energy, and keep going. And even getting fairly specific about what we mean in each instance. Locally grown food, regenerative agriculture, education for wisdom, a lifelong process, but also in the classroom, affordable housing in blended neighborhoods, culture that values wisdom and compassion and creativity more than acquisition, consumption, and status. Economics for the sake of well-being, human and ecological, not just ever-increasing GDP. City planning, where you have cities where there's not so much, where commuting is not so required. Good public transportation in proximity of workplace to where you get your essentials, grocery stores, things like that. And people like John Cobb think that this kind of civilization and those kinds of communities, they are our hope. They are our hope. That's it. But then keep going. and people from all walks of life can give themselves to that hope. So what we're doing at the Cobb Institute is identifying local communities that want to make a commitment to this kind of thing, and we want to help them in whatever way we can. In the particular community that the Cobb Institute is focused on is the city of Pomona, California. So it's one of the poorer cities in that Los Angeles basin. But as we're working with Pomona, California, we also have become aware of many other communities around the world that are committed to just this kind of thing. So, for example, we're part of the Compassionate City Network that Karen Armstrong got going. But Paul, that's my 1 minute response or 2 minute response to where the big ideas truly come down to earth. They come down to earth in local communities and in a different kind of civilization that lives with respect and care for the community of life. And churches can play a role in that, a powerful role. So that's it for my concreteness. I don't know how concrete that was, but.
Thank you, Jay.
It
Thank
is
you.
exciting. It is exciting material. It is very helpful. Thank you.
And now it falls to me to say thank you all for showing up, adding your minds and your voices to this morning's conversation and the ideas that have been shared. So thank you to all of you, and a special thank you to Jared for being our tech guy, and a very special thank you to Jay and Patricia for guiding us in so many things to think about and take forward. Thank you. It's such an honor and a pleasure to see you and have you part of our morning. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.